And my name is Evan Brenner. I am the digital content specialist at Geographic Solutions. We have this campaign that we do every year around Second Chance Month. And we are a software development company headquartered in Palm Harbor, Florida, but with, employees all over the nation and, somewhat of a remote first approach at this point. But we have a solution that helps folks with reentering the workforce. And so for this segment, we would love to interview somebody or get in touch and have a conversation with somebody for Second Chance Month who has maybe experienced some of the things that we try to help folks with. And so, in reaching out to Matt Moore at Core Civic, you were like on the top of his list of people that we should reach out to conduct an interview. And so I was very grateful, and I am also very grateful for your time today. So, Augie, I understand that when you were incarcerated, you saw a need for financial literacy. And can you share a little bit about how you started teaching and how you started, how that integrates with employment readiness as well?
Sure. So I got involved in the education department in the prison that I was in, and I volunteered to start teaching some classes because what I saw almost immediately is the situation where, some of the men I was locked up with would leave, and then 30 days, 60 days, 6 months later, they'd show right back up. And I came to realize a lot of it was that they didn't have the preparation necessary to re-enter, especially those that had been incarcerated for a long period of time. So I started teaching courses and actually let the population, my fellow inmates, guide what they wanted to learn. And so the first course I taught, I remember going way back, was a principles of real estate. But then they would make suggestions and financial literacy or learning more about credit and how to put together a budget and those fundamental things that sometimes we take for granted. It seemed to be of value to them. And when they walked out, I will say when they did walk out, they would walk out with a completed budget. They'd understand how credit works. They'd have definite steps that they could take to help to either establish credit for the first time or rebuild credit, knew the difference between leasing and buying a car. So we covered a lot of topics that I think was relevant to a population that was re-entering society and really starting over, as most of us had to do.
And reading your bio on your website, I realized that those things and that how somebody, a lot of, talk about Second Chance Month can be centered around financial literacy, because if somebody's coming, back re-entering the workforce and doesn't have any of those skills, I think to your point, from what I read, they can end right back up where they were.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I've added since the course was initially developed when I got out. I mean, I put it together on the inside, but then when I got out and had the access to the internet and all these other wonderful tools, I was able to enhance the course. But one of the things I've added within the last year, because I see what a problem it is, and that's predatory lending. And so there were so many guys I was locked up with that had never had a bank account. And if they needed to transact any type of banking business, they'd go to the currency exchange. So they're paying a fee to cash a check. They're paying a fee for every money order they get, and they're walking out of there, and they've given away a percentage of their paycheck because they didn't have the guidance on how to get a bank account established. And so that, in fact, the section 1 of our financial literacy course is mainstream financial world starts through a bank account. We walk them through the process of what you need in order to open a bank account, what that actually looks like.
Augie, what does Second Chance Month mean to you? How can we as a society do better to give more second chances, and even to give multiple second chances? And a lot of time our team talks about giving another chance.
That question, if you don't stop me, I could probably talk 5 or 6 hours about it, because there's so many more things that can be done. And believe me, I'm blessed in so many ways. I've been out now going on, it'll be 6 years in July. 3 of those years I spent on probation. So I've actually been free of the system for almost 3 years. But, there's a false impression that all we need to do to help somebody re-enter is get them a job. And I actually was asked to speak at an event, and that was the topic of my talk, is it takes more than a job. And while a job is very important, please don't get me wrong, but there's so many things I experienced when I re-entered. I was gone 13 years. I had never touched a smartphone. When I got on the computer, the last time I had been on the computer was in the dial-up days where you hear the bong bong and the hissing sound. So to even get on the computer and how fast it worked and all these other things, when I got my first job and they told me to set up a LinkedIn profile, I had no idea what they were talking about. And so there's so many other things that can be integrated into reentry beyond just let's make sure that you're working. That's all well and fine. And then the other part I think that's so important is that, and I focus a lot of time, I teach courses inside jails and prisons and treatment centers and halfway houses and in probation. And one of the things that I talk about is that if all we're qualified for upon our release is an entry level type job, for me, for example, my skills were outdated. I mean, I had to get started in a way, but if that's all we're qualified for in the beginning, if we don't do anything to improve our skill set or our education, we'll probably always be in an entry level job. So I think, again, more than just a job, it should be a job that's integrated with the opportunity to grow, such as a paid apprenticeship, those which are available. We just need to make sure that the population that's in need of those things is made aware of how to make that happen. And that's one of the things that I do is want to walk through the process. Here's how you can get into a paid apprenticeship. So you're getting skills while you're bringing home a paycheck.
It's funny that you should bring up apprenticeships, and maybe timely or coincidental, because we also have a great apprenticeship program that we do here at Geographic Solutions, where we have have about 5 out of 6 apprentices who have made it to full-time positions. So that is definitely something cool to hear, and something near and dear to our hearts here at Geographic Solutions as well. Um, our audience that will hear this will mostly consist of youth specialists, WEO case managers, program managers, and a lot of folks throughout workforce development, case management, and other industries that tie into that. Would you be able to share a few tips or insight that folks can use to help others succeed when they're reentering the workforce?
Sure. So first of all, I'm a big fan of WEOA. I heard you mention WEOA. I think that it's a tremendous program, and I can't tell you how many dozens of people I've referred into different WEOA programs around the country as a way to advance their skills. And I think that part of it has to be bringing in I think they call them soft skills, the life skill type thing, communication skills, conflict resolution, different things that allow us to fit in better. Because in the beginning, there seems to be so many barriers. Beginning when I was released, there seemed to be so many barriers to deal with, to have at least a comfort level with how to speak to people. And I struggle with that. I mean, I actually did develop social anxiety while I was away. I never had that problem before, but I felt like an outcast. And so if I'd be in a room filled with people, and not a big room necessarily, it could be 6 or 8 people, I still would feel like an outcast, which made it challenging for me to be able to open up and engage in everyday conversation. And so I think that if case managers, if employers, if people that are in that process from getting from point A, which is released from prison, to point B, which is entering mainstream society, I think if we encourage and support and make available those type of skills and opportunities for us to integrate with others, I think there's real value that comes out of that.
On the same note, what do you recommend for employers seeking to hire people as they're reentering the workforce?
Patience. So I tell the story when I first got out. I went to a halfway house and I got a job, and I had use of a car, and I'd leave in the morning to go down, for those from Chicago, the Eisenhower Expressway, which is a very crowded expressway. And as I'd go down that entry ramp, I really struggled. I'd driven for 25 years before I got locked up, but I really struggled coming down that entry ramp because I'm not used to seeing things move that fast. But the point that I make is that all I needed was somebody to be patient and let me merge in, and I drove just like everybody else. And that's, I speak to employers regularly, and that's what I tell them is that you just need to be a little bit patient, a little bit understanding that it's going to take some time for some of this to come together. But when it does come together, the numbers, the statistics support that we are a very loyal bunch. When we were given that first opportunity to get to work, and we worked hard, and we show because we got a little bit of chip on our shoulder that we have something we want to prove.
That's great. Augie, I read a few of your articles on victorious living, and one in particular really spoke to me, and I think that's the one that about the experience of handling a life-changing event, forgiveness, and moving on. And so, can you just describe a little bit about how you wrote that article and some of the things the key points behind that? I think the two life-changing events you were talking about was re-entering, and the other was the passing of your parents. And so
Yes.
I just thought maybe you could just expand on that a little bit.
So all the stuff that I wrote about with victorious living was based on my own experience. And like many, when I first got locked up, I reverted to like a 6-year-old boy. I was blaming everybody else, and I was justifying my behavior. And that made it harder for me to actually get into the groove of how to be productive while you're incarcerated and keep your mind engaged and keep a positive attitude. And I got to a point, and it took a couple of years to get there, but I got to a point where I took responsibility. It was my bad decisions, my bad choices, my behavior, my greed that put me where I was. But the problem with that is that once I hit that point, I woke up every day angry with myself, because I'd think about how could I have put myself here? How could I have put my family in such a bad situation? Almost immediately after getting incarcerated, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and died 6 months later. So I didn't even have a chance to process that. It happened so quickly, and on the inside, even more so, because I couldn't see her and I could only speak to her on a limited basis. But once I started to be angry with myself, it didn't break me from that cycle of negativity. But I got to the point, and a lot of this was through my faith. A lot of it was through some just rational thinking. And that is that I accept the fact that I'm a human being that made some mistakes. I certainly wish I could go back to the day before those mistakes and behave differently, but I can't. But when I got to that point about accepting that I made decisions, I did things that were not characteristic of who I believe I am, my life got a lot better. And it allowed for me to do the bulk of my time in a productive way, to be prepared to be released, and also in a positive way. And one of the things, I know that this doesn't necessarily, what you're doing doesn't necessarily get into the inside, but one of the things that I tell guys is that, if you're really struggling the way you feel about yourself, just start helping people. Doesn't matter what you help them with. We feel better about ourselves when we help somebody else. So if a new person that just comes in and they're clearly struggling and they got that deer in the headlights look, take some time to visit with them and get to know them a little bit and let them know that everything's going to be okay, that there's some things they just have to adapt to. So to answer your question, I think that it was a process for me that allowed me to really emerge from this in a situation where I felt like I could at least start to fit in.
Thank you. Augie, I really just have one last question, and I wanted to ask if you had anything else that you'd like to add, or if you'd like to talk about Second Opportunity or any of their organizations that you're involved in.
I appreciate the chance to do that, truly. So Second Opportunity is something that's been an amazing gift. It's something that every day, it's been unbelievable. It's something I started by volunteering to go into Cook County Jail in Chicago. At the time, they had 9,600 inmates, so they're enormous. And this thing just took off, and now we're in 14 different states. We have our courses in both English and Spanish. Former cellmate of mine did the Spanish ones. It comes with workbooks, and we're able to be on tablets. We have a DVD series for the smaller jails or facilities that don't have Wi-Fi near the housing units, and so they can use a regular TV set and a $59 DVD player. And we're also on a smartphone for things like probation, drug court, diversion programs. So really what's come out of this for me is sharing my experiences and some of the lessons I learned, hopefully to help others, that if it's something that I fell down doing, that I can explain what I could have done differently. And it's something that I seem to navigate pretty well. I like to share how that worked out and some of the things that they could do. So we fit well with employers that are going to be making a commitment to hiring from this population to provide those type of skills, the soft skills that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
I don't know if we covered this, but what are a few, besides financial literacy, what are a few skills that you recommend that are very important when you're reentering the workforce?
So I think that there needs to be a plan. So goal setting is a big piece of what we do. That's we have a whole course on goal setting and creating productive habits. But irrespective of our courses, goal setting is important, because if I'm coming out, I'm going to get a job, an entry level type job, I need to have a real plan on how I'm going to get from point A to point B. How am I going to develop the skills or acquire the education to allow me to get into a better paying job that offers opportunity for advancement and benefits and all those other things? Because if we don't have a well-constructed written plan, it's not just going to happen. They're not just automatically going to promote me. And the skills just aren't going to jump to me. It's something that I have to make happen. So I think that that's one thing that is really an important skill. I think communication skills, and I think we need to work on that on the inside. It's amazing to me how bad our vocabulary gets as far as cursing and what have you. When I'm surrounded by men 24 hours a day, and this is type of conversations that are going on, but we can't take that with us into society. I mean, we simply can't. It doesn't play when we're looking for a job. It doesn't play when we're looking to create new relationships. So I think some of those things we can absolutely work on the inside, so we walk out and we're better prepared to deal with that.
Thank you, Augie. I want to be respectful of time because it is about 1:25, and I know that we kind of set this up for about a half an hour. So I just wanted to thank you for spending some time with me, and I hope that this, was beneficial and a good spend of your time today.
Well, it was, and if there's anything I can do to help speak to the population that I work with and through the medium that you provide, I'm always glad to do so.
Excellent. All right, Augie, thank you so much, and we will chat soon.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.